Hello and welcome to Viral News. I'm your host, Stephen Calabria. Viral News is a podcast by whowhatwhy.org dedicated to all things coronavirus. Our show will feature discussions with experts in different fields who shed light on how the virus is affecting their areas of expertise. In some cases, like on today's program, we'll hear from medical professionals who can give listeners practical advice on how to deal with the outbreak. Now, I know you're probably thinking, who the hell is this guy and what makes him remotely qualified to talk about the coronavirus? To that, I would answer, well, first of all, that's not very nice. And second of all, I'm a reporter by trade, and if there's one story in the world right now that's important to be covering, it's the coronavirus. Our first guest on the program is Dr. Kelly Bay, a functional medicine practitioner who will discuss how to navigate the coronavirus pandemic from a health perspective. Then we'll speak with Elisa Kriegel, a psychologist who will walk us through the mental health ramifications of the coronavirus and the quarantine. But first, here's Dr. Kelly Bay. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, how are you, Stephen?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing as best as I can during this whole thing.
Yep. Tell me about it. So can you tell us first, what is your title?
I am a chiropractor, but I specialize in functional medicine. I did some additional training, and I have a master's degree in the biochemistry of human nutrition. And so that's my main thing. I have a long history of treating HIV positive individuals with functional protocols to improve their immune systems. And I was actually recently recognized for that work from the LGBT network, who awarded me back in December.
Now, what exactly is functional medicine?
That's a good question. It's kind of a philosophy of looking at illness. So it's kind of systems based. And instead of focusing on symptoms that an individual may be experiencing and trying to get rid of the symptoms, it kind of takes a look at what could be the root cause of these symptoms by looking at the person as a whole. So a person's genetic variants, their nutritional status, just like a complete picture, even including mental status, stress reduction techniques, everything to try and kind of get to the root cause and prevent the illness from the beginning.
So I assume you've been doing a lot of reading about the coronavirus.
Yes.
So could you tell our listeners, what is the coronavirus?
Coronaviruses in general are actually a family of viruses, and it includes, coronaviruses that are causes of the common cold to more serious coronaviruses like SARS and MERS. So COVID-19 is in that family of viruses, the severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2, actually.
What is the difference between a virus and a disease?
Viruses are infectious agents, and they are kind of different from bacteria and other bugs because they kind of live in a twilight state and they can only become alive through using living cells as a host. They kind of hijack your cells and use them to replicate.
As opposed to a disease, which is what?
Well, disease can be a manifestation of pretty much anything: virus, genetic variants, bacteria. It's just a term to describe something that has altered the normal function of the body and producing illness. A disease can be, a genetic disease or a viral illness or a bacterial infection. They're all diseases.
Right. And how is the coronavirus different from a cold or the flu?
So colds and flus are very common, the flu being caused by the influenza virus. COVID-19 is similar to the flu in the fact that it's spread to other people through respiratory droplets, but it is significantly more contagious, we're learning. And actually, the latest research is saying things like the airborne route of infection is just like much, much higher than the influenza virus. But they do cause similar symptoms, the coughing, the fever, the chills, and it does take about 4 to 5 days after exposure to have these symptoms appear. But they're just different viruses. And the coronavirus, we're learning, is a much more serious virus because it has these little spike proteins on the outside of it that even are different than the other coronaviruses in that family. And why that's bad is because these spike proteins can kind of get into cells that other viruses wouldn't normally be able to get into. So it basically makes it a lot more infectious, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. Now, are there general tips that you can offer our listeners about ways they can protect themselves from the virus?
Yeah, I really am a fan of the whole social distancing option because of these newer studies that demonstrate that COVID basically has this very severe airborne infection route. This means, being in the same room as someone who's infected and just breathing the same air as them is enough to get you sick. So I know there are so many jokes about why can't we just quarantine older people, or like, oh, do I really need to take this seriously? But the social distancing is really, really key in kind of flattening the curve and making sure that people don't act as carriers to people who are more at risk with decreased immune systems. If someone's going under cancer treatment, HIV, people on immune dampening drugs for immune diseases like psoriasis, even, these people walk around every single day around you. You may not be aware of them. It's not just older people. So I think it's just really important to stay inside and stay away from other people because breathing can get them sick.
And related to that, what kinds of things should people be eating in order to take preventative measures?
Okay, so I can give some general guidelines. We definitely know things like drinking alcohol can depress the immune system. Eating excess amounts of sugar can cause immune dysregulation. So staying away from high sugar, alcohol, processed foods, things with additives is really important with any illness, really. And trying to eat nutrient dense foods, I think, is really important. So you want to go for vegetables, especially colorful vegetables, leafy greens. They contain a ton of antioxidants, vitamins, nutrients, minerals that are all really helpful and necessary for the immune system. Cruciferous vegetables in particular contain this substance called sulforaphane, and it's a really powerful antioxidant that also has anti-cancer properties. But why it's really great for preventing illness is it's really good for oxidative stress in the body. It really decreases inflammation, and it helps your body make a chemical called glutathione, which is your body makes it. It's the most powerful antioxidant you can make, and it becomes utilized a lot more when you're sick. So your need for it is higher, and eating foods like that can really increase your production. So just sticking to whole foods, lean protein, healthy anti-inflammatory fats like walnuts, avocados, olive oil, things like that can be really beneficial in keeping your body in tip-top shape.
If someone was to find that they tested positive, how do you think that should alter their approach in terms of lifestyle choices, medicines, and diet?
I want to preface this by saying we still are learning a lot about this virus. So there are a lot of interventions that I would suggest for other viruses that we know more about that I just don't feel comfortable recommending for this particular case. But I would say that if someone is positive, I would be in contact with your primary care doctor or whoever you're under care with, and make sure that you're monitored properly and follow whatever recommendations that they give you. And if they do tell you that it's okay for you to stay home under self quarantine, I would be very diligent about diet. I think everything that I just stated about sticking to, antioxidant, nutrient dense foods is key. Avoiding sugar, alcohol, that stuff, processed food, would be very beneficial. But some very conservative natural interventions that I could say might have some use is there is some research on a botanical called astragalus, and it's a Chinese herb. And it's been shown to have some antiviral activity against other types of coronaviruses. So, that's something to kind of think about. But in addition to just botanical interventions, I would go back to antioxidants like vitamin C, glutathione. Vitamin C is this incredible, incredible thing that not only has an effect on lowering inflammation, but your white blood cells, which are your immune system cells, require vitamin C to fight pathogens and free radicals. So you can actually support your immune system by taking higher doses of vitamin C. And it also is a natural antihistamine. So you got that going for you. And, there are some glutathione supplements that can be really useful to help your body with tissue repair and any oxidative damage that's caused by a virus. Other than that, there's also like lemon balm tea, which is a natural antiviral. That could be a natural intervention to explore. These things don't have side effects. They're very safe to try. So I think those would be the natural interventions that I would probably suggest for someone who is self-quarantined and in stable condition, but sick with the virus.
Right. Okay. And what would you say, based on what you've observed? I know things are constantly in flux and it's hard to get a grip on much of anything, but what would you say are the biggest challenges facing the medical community as it attempts to grapple with the crisis?
I think the biggest challenges really are medical supplies. So many people have been buying the N95 medical masks that I've heard from colleagues that just basic medical supplies, those masks and disinfectant, things that hospitals need to stay on top of pandemics like this, they're just really difficult to get right now. And they need them to help contain this outbreak. And doing your part with social distancing is really important, because I think the other challenge in the medical community right now is the overburdening of hospitals. We already are kind of in a place where kids aren't in school and their parents who, have all kinds of different professions, but think about the medical professions. They already don't have childcare. They're scrambling to figure things out, and they have to go to work every day and treat people coming in with COVID-19. And just being kind of aware of these, I guess, societal needs and doing your part with social distancing, I think is just so important, because these challenges are real and it's going to kind of determine the outcome of this crisis.
All right. Well, thank you, Kelly. And I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Next, we'll hear from Elisa Kriegel, PhD, a clinical psychologist with over 20 years of experience providing therapy for young adults, and couples. She's currently in private practice in Manhattan. Her website is elisakriegel.com. Hi, Elisa.
Hi, Stephen.
So thanks for being on the show. What is your background?
I am a clinical psychologist. I have a PhD in clinical psychology, and I've been working, I have a private practice here in Manhattan in New York City, working with young adults and couples. Been doing that for about 20 years.
That background then seems like it would really come in handy right now. So this is just speculating here, but even though the coronavirus doesn't have a modern precedent, to what would you compare its effects on human behavior and psychology?
I've been reading and hearing about comparisons to war. And while I haven't been, in a war, I think that just the extreme upheaval and fear of the, not knowing what's going to happen is sort of the most, which is extreme. There's obviously differences. We are not at war. It's not like World War II and London's being bombed. But I think just that having to kind of stay in our houses, staying put, not fear of not having supplies we need, just this general unknown and extreme change that everyone's going through is the most I can think of.
Is there a psychological price to be paid for extended periods of time where people feel that, or where they're just by themselves?
Yeah, I think this can be really challenging and difficult for a lot of people. And I think having that type of feeling really isolated, a lot of people, in New York especially, already, it can be, even though it's a big city, people can feel very alone. That said, it's really interesting because there's also people have a history, like say Walt Whitman or people will actually pay to go on a, 10-day meditation retreat. So there is also something to be said that's really positive for spending time by one's, spending time alone, spending time with yourself, having some of that isolation. We're in a time right now where it's interesting, where I think we're not used to, we're really social. We are very much about, being with other people. We're at a time where we need to be more isolated, but we also, unlike Walt Whitman or unlike being on a meditation retreat, we have access to online and connections and phones and talking with people and seeing people online in video conferences. I know clients who are doing like video happy hour, with all their friends from, old friends from college, or, groups like AA have now turned to like a Zoom format. So not only are you just chatting with one another or texting, but you're seeing people's faces. So, I think there's this balance where, yes, this is challenging and times alone can be detrimental, but we still have this opportunity for social connection. The one thing we're not getting, I think, is that social, is touch, right? You're not being able to reach out and hug someone. And I do think that can be difficult, especially if you're someone living alone, not to have that touch. But I think I think you need to make sure that you are utilizing all of the tools that are out there to maintain social connection.
Right. And that whole thing about isolation too, it is helpful, obviously, oftentimes to be by oneself, but I imagine it completely changes the experience, especially psychologically, when it's forced upon you.
Yeah, I think of it almost like, when prisons used to put inmates in isolation, it was actually, done away with. That they were not allowed, I think, to do it post, 24 hours, because it could cause, psychological breakdowns and trauma. So that type of extreme isolation is not healthy. And obviously this is an isolation that's not by choice, like a Walt Whitman. So we have somewhere in between those two extremes. While not as extreme as a prison isolation, it's also very few people would have chosen this as an option. Like, hey, let me hang out in my house for the next month alone. So, but I do think we need to be aware of that. Reaching out, even beyond friends, for professional help. This is a great time to do that as well.
Right. And I mean, to that point, are there any strategies that people can use to cope with the aloneness and just the general feelings of helplessness and despair that many of us seem to be feeling right now?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, one of the things first is just validating that this is very real, that like, and also that you're not alone in that. This is the one time I think we could say it's not just your neighbors, but like everyone throughout the world is having a lot of those same experiences. I think everyone's probably seen that video that went viral of people singing from their balconies in Italy. But, that it really speaks to, people just want to be, have that connection and have that emotional connection. So coping strategies become really important at a time like this. I would say definitely utilizing all of the resources. There's even more now than ever online meetings. As I said, AA is now, so if you're in any 12-step group, all of them have now gone online. A lot of them are on Zoom meetings, so you can actually see people's faces and talk with them. There's support groups online. There's online therapy, either through chat. There's, chat lines, BetterHelp, Talkspace. There's crisis lines. So I would really encourage people to sort of Google that, take a look at that. I think the other thing that is a really good coping skill at a time like now is really sort of staying in this present moment. We all have a tendency to sort of future trip and catastrophize, and we're already in something that feels like such a catastrophe that our anxiety is just going to make that worse. So if you're someone who gets really triggered by the news, say, give yourself a window of time to kind of catch up on the news of the day and then stop looking. Some people are news junkies. That's great if you don't get stressed out by the news, but a lot of people that I know I work with just kind of go down a rabbit hole and get really stressed out reading more and more information.
Right. It's hard not to.
Yeah. And if you're one of those people and you're noticing as you're reading it, you're feeling more anxious, that's a time to, like, it's okay to not know every breaking news the moment it's happening. It will still be there. So give yourself a break from it, take some time away from that. I would say if you haven't been someone who's explored meditation at all, I do a lot of kind of meditation and mindfulness with my clients, and almost all of them have connected. There's so many apps online now. This is a great time. And I know so many people who've said like, oh yeah, I should be doing that, or I want to do that, but I don't have time. Well, now there's time. And there's great meditation apps that you can do, not even, some are free, some you pay for. Headspace is a big one. Calm just is another really great one that will do like a 10-day introduction beginner meditation. And so you can do, your 1 10-minute session a day. And really kind of, it gives you that space to pause and kind of not get caught up. The idea of meditation is that our brains are going to think, our brains are going to worry, our brains are going to be, planning for the future. And while that's great, sometimes we need a break from it. The meditation really teaches you to take a pause. So getting onto one of those apps now is awesome. The one I've been using lately is called Insight Timer. And it is a free, basically, library that has lectures, courses. There's like a 10-day course on anxiety. A lot of people are posting now courses specifically related to the coronavirus, how to deal with anxiety around it, how to deal with fear, letting go of fear. There's sleep meditations. For a lot of us, our sleep is really disturbed because of all the anxiety and worries and changes. So there are like really nice sleep meditations. There's really great on the same app, sleep music, some which actually even balances the brain waves. So if you listen to it with headphones, it can actually create more calm in the brain. So now's a great time to kind of like add to your toolbox of coping skills, talking to a friend, getting online, FaceTiming with a friend. So you're really seeing the face. The other thing I really like is it's this type of therapy. It's called EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique. It's more commonly known as tapping. And tapping has become really popular. The great thing about it is it's something you can do by yourself. You don't need a therapist doing it with you, talking you through it. And there's a wonderful app called the Tapping Solution. I think there's also an online, like a website. So the Tapping Solution was done by this man, Nick Ortner, and he just released, I think, a series of 11 different tapping meditations. And tapping, if you go onto the website, it gives you a little bit of an introduction. You're basically tapping your fingers on different meridian points in the body. And research has shown that it can alleviate a lot of different symptoms. People have had amazing success with it. I saw a video of someone who actually improved his breathing, was going through COVID, and improved his breathing through doing one of these tapping exercises. And so they've created for free, some of these apps you do have to pay for, but a lot have free content, and they've created for free and will keep for free all of the tapping exercises that are related to coronavirus. So that's, I think, a great resource that people can be taking a look at.
Then there's the issue of couples. So couples who are locked in the house together, especially in cramped quarters that are common here in New York City, are especially vulnerable to feelings of helplessness and frustration, right?
Definitely. Definitely. I mean, I think especially for us New Yorkers, right? We know, and anyone who's in a couple and has traveled and gotten into some really, really intense fights traveling when you're in a car or, just with that one person for 10 days at a time, and you have different ideas of what you should be doing and you get on each other's nerves. Yeah. I mean, I think I had just read something about that there's like a really high number of divorce filings happening in China following people getting out of quarantine. So the divorce rate is basically going up following this. So yeah, I think the bottom line is we all need time and space away from each other. While I think it can be really wonderful, obviously, for the people who are alone, are like, hey, I would like to be, have someone else there. I think the people who are there are sort of worrying, how am I going to be with this person so long? So, I think that this is a very real thing. Yes.
So what can couples do then to mitigate the risk of just unloading on each other while they're cooped up inside?
Yeah, I think, right. We have so much increased frustration. There's fear, there's helplessness. And when you're part of a couple, that often gets put on one another, right? We kind of dump our stuff on each other. I think, a really important thing is you need to set boundaries. If you are in a couple and you are, in this together, you need to set some boundaries. While couple time is great, it's really important to remember that we all need time apart and we all need time to be doing our own thing. And you're not hurting your partner's feelings to say like, hey, I need to go call a friend. Like, your partner should not be the end all be all only person you need in your life. You need other people as well. So if you are still working, even if you're not working, I think it's really important to set a schedule with built-in time for, be it work, or if there's a book you wanted to read or a project you're working on, to set a schedule for your own exercise, for meditation, and each of you to do that separately, for communicating with each of your own families, each of your own friends, even entertainment, right? Everyone's like, oh yeah, we're just going to watch Netflix together. But couples don't always agree on what they want to watch. And sometimes it's really nice to binge watch, that really dumb show, that your partner doesn't want to see, but that's like a really guilty pleasure. Your time doesn't all have to be couple time. I think on the opposite, this is also a great time to make the most of your time together, right? This is a great time if you're alone and there's no kids that you're worrying about and you have the utmost privacy. Like, this is a great time to have a lot of sex, right? To reconnect on that physical level. And it doesn't just have to be your usual go-to. And I'm not just talking about intercourse, just even getting in touch with more sensual experiences, right? Giving each other massages every day. Plan a date night. Have each person plan, on their own, like a date night. Even if you're not going out, like have that person like set up a picnic or put on candles and have, give the person a massage. Like, this is a time to get a little bit creative, to step out of the comfort zone of what you usually do as a couple, and take little steps to like, how can you kind of keep things positive, keep the passion going. There's see this, I'm sort of, it's almost like seeing it as when you are spending time together, like a couple retreat. What would you do if you were on vacation or had a night away? Or even if you do have kids, what would you do if you had a night away from the kids? So set the kids up with their movie or let them fall asleep. And after they're asleep, do your date night. It started out as an article. I refer a lot of my couple clients to this. The New York Times several years ago did an article called 36 Questions That Lead to Love. And it was based on research that was done where they actually brought strangers together to answer these 36 questions, which go from more like superficial questions to more increasingly intimate and personal. And at the end of the 36 questions, they had an exercise of like just looking in each other's eyes without speaking for, I think it was a minute. And at the end of that, all of these pairs who were strangers to each other described feeling more of a bond and connection with the other person. What has since happened is that people are like, hey, if it works for strangers, it's going to work really well for couples. So it's a great exercise if you are quarantined. There's actually apps, even if you look up like 36 questions that lead to love. I think there's a bunch of different apps that have been developed around it. So you can actually go through each question one by one, and there's guidelines for how to do it. But what a wonderful opportunity. People don't usually have the time or make the time to do something like this. So this can actually be a time to actually get to know your partner in a different way, in a deeper level. So I think anything like that, this is also an opportunity to kind of do something different. with that partner so that it's not just the complaining and the stress and the frustration.
Right. And you touched a little bit on children. What would you say are the psychological risks presented uniquely to children in a crisis like this?
Yeah. The one thing I want to say before anything to people is to remember that children are highly resilient in a lot of ways, even more than we are as adults, right? They can really handle a lot more than we think. What I'm hearing is from online and clients and friends as well, is that a lot of parents are actually more panicked, partly because of their worrying, like their kids won't have enough activity, the boredom, fear. But I think that, the hardest thing for kids is that they had a set routine. They usually were in parks, they were playing, they were with other kids. So that's really the biggest risk, is how do we keep kids stimulated and how do we also keep them with a sense of safety? There's so much unknown. How much do we share? How much don't we share? Those are the things I think we need to look at. I think in some ways, what's interesting is for any of you who have kids, there was a lot of question, how much TV time, but then it became online time. How much gaming time is too much? How much is okay? And I think we're now in a place where I'm hearing parents like, thank God for the online gaming. It's a way for kids to, in some ways they're used to this. A lot of kids were already connecting with friends online. We're already chatting. We're already Instagramming. Like they can be sharing their day with each other and posting about it and posting their stories. If it's older kids, for younger kids, I think a lot of even younger kids, we're doing Minecraft and you can play it with other kids, Fortnite. So there's I do think that there is a lot of positive that kids have in terms of there's a sort of tech world that they've grown up with that they're really used to, that some adults are more in the tech world, but a lot aren't, so I think that kids have that familiarity. So in some ways that part will be nothing new for them.
So for the stressed out, terrified parents who are experiencing this, what would you say are the best and most practical strategies for parenting?
Exactly. Great question. I think, the first thing I would say, which is, yes, sort of a strategy, but not a concrete one, is kids are going to have a lot of questions. There's sort of a rule in parenting that you answer the questions they ask with simple and direct answers and don't tell them more than they're asking. An older child could be a conversation, but for a younger child, be really careful. Like what they're asking may not be like how, what is this, or how, they may not want to know the details of how the virus is spreading and how long till the vaccine. Like they just want to know with some of their questions, am I going to be okay? Are you going to be okay? Are we safe? And so I think it's really important to keep the answers to questions simple. It's okay to say you don't know. Don't say more than they're able to, for what your child's sort of comprehension level to be. Reassure them that you're there, that they're going to be okay. I think that's sort of the first most important thing. After that, I think it's really important for kids that you help structure their day. Most kids, school-age kids, are used to, even preschool, are used to having a set schedule. And I think setting a schedule for them, even in this time, is equally important, and it's going to help them maintain a sense of normalcy. So having a set schedule that builds in, if they're online school, builds in some exercise, right? If they can do something online, if you can, have a dance party, but builds in some sort of exercise for them so they're getting that energy out, that builds in a social time for them, that builds in, so that basically you're creating a schedule just like they would have if they were going to school and having play dates, virtual play dates. I think anything virtual is going to be a great way to connect to friends.
All right. Well, that's terrific. Was there anything else you wanted to say?
So yeah, I think this, this is a tough time. I'm going to reiterate that this is tough for a lot of people. I do need to say, like, if you are really struggling with any sort of more serious mental health condition, make sure you are getting the help you need. If you are getting to a place where you really are feeling like so helpless, so depressed, suicidal, reach out to hotlines, to your doctor, even your general doctor, to get referrals. Look for therapists. A lot of therapists are continuing to do work online, are doing video sessions, phone sessions. So do not be afraid to do that. You are not alone in this. And we will get through this. So I think that's really important. That said, I think this is also a really interesting opportunity. I'm going to, speak as totally as a therapist. I'm in the business of change. And I think that for most of us, the human nature is that we like safety and we like things to be the same. And we are now in a time where we don't have a choice but to change. And in some ways, as difficult as that is, it's also an opportunity. And it's an opportunity to work on yourself, to work on your relationships. I see it as a reset of sorts, a reset for the things that we haven't been doing. Had you been working too hard and not making time for self-care? Well, now's time where you have plenty of time to really work on yourself. And what I mean by self-care is just like taking time for yourself, taking a bath, doing, talking with friends, doing the things you may not have spent enough time doing. Were you spending quality time with your children, or just sort of going through the motions? Were you not really being present with family and loved ones? Not keeping up contact with friends? Like, I think all of us have a list of things that that scared us, or that we knew that we wanted to do, or maybe should be doing, but weren't. And so I think this is actually a really interesting opportunity where we may be in this situation for a while, and we are going to come out of this situation. Do we want to come out of it better than we went in? Are there things we want to learn academically? Is there a course you want to do? Do you want to learn a language? Or the things you want to learn emotionally, how to handle things better, do things different, right? Talk with people you don't get to talk with every day. So I think that if we can reframe this, sometimes there's this idea that, I'll give you this equation: pain plus non-acceptance equals misery. And it comes somewhat from Buddhist ideas, but the idea is that we all have pain, and obviously going through this, that we're all going through on a global level, is painful in a lot of ways. It's scary. People don't know what's going to happen. That pain is there and it's real. If we don't accept it, or, if we can't deal with it, then we're going to be really miserable. But what we have an opportunity to do is sort of reframe it. And instead of focusing on the pain as, and by non-acceptance, I mean, like, this is so terrible, just repeating, like, oh my God, this is so bad, and what's going to happen, and and being in that cycle of just, kind of freaking out, we're going to just keep being miserable. If we can reframe this as, what, yeah, this sucks and is going to be hard, but this is something we can do different. This is an opportunity. There's a saying in Buddhism, or actually in Buddhist circles, or Buddhism light, I should say, that I would refer to something like this as a gift from the Buddha. And a gift from the Buddha is the idea of it is that we are being given something that we don't like, and it doesn't feel good, but that in the end is good for us and we will grow from. And I think the people who are going to be able to go into this with that sort of reframe of, this isn't great and there's nothing I can do about it, but what can I do to, look at myself, to come out better, to work on some of the things, to change some of the patterns in my life, because we have the time to do it now. And if we can see that as sort of a blessing in disguise, reframing it in that way can actually change our mental health and how we deal with it. So I would really encourage all people to find your way to do that, to reframe this in a way that you can make it a more positive, more livable situation for yourself.
Elisa, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Stephen, and be well and stay safe.
Thanks.
Okay, take care.
Bye. If you like this podcast, please share it and help others find it by rating it and reviewing it on iTunes, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. You can also support the podcast and all the work we do by going to whowhatwhy.org/donate. Once again, I'm your host, Stephen Calabria. Stay safe and stay home.